Have you wondered what financial advisors actually think about money? This is your sneak peek at the conversations within Financial Design Studio. Michelle Smollenberger, the CEO here, will be your host as you go behind the designs.
All right, welcome back to the podcast. Today we are talking about cash. Cash is king, right? Well, we're going to find out. We're going to talk about that. So today I have Trevor Meyer here with me. He is a partner here at Financial Design Studio. So thanks for joining me, Trevor.
Happy to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Exactly, yeah. No, I'm excited to talk through this because I know you are a person that always wants to get the best deal you're looking for. What are all the little ways that you can save a buck? Like that's you, which is great.
I tend to focus a lot on details and just trying to find ways, how can I eke out, how can I optimize things to the best extent possible. I do recognize that sometimes it drives my wife crazy in terms of the frequency with which I do it, but it's just fun. It's like a puzzle for me to solve. So.
Well, I mean, it's a great trait because not all of us do this. So I'm thinking back to, what was it, a week or two ago? I think we were all testing our bandwidth speed or upload and download speed for our internet. Yeah. And you were just like, whoa. And so you're like, everybody stop and call your internet providers, right?
Yeah, it's one of those things that say, if Xfinity, so that's who provides our internet here locally, if Xfinity has a good deal and you wanted to upgrade your internet speed and you're on a low speed, hey, now's a great time to do it. So when you can eke out a good deal, you want to share it with the world.
So not even saving the most when you're buying something, but getting all of what you're paying for.
Absolutely.
That's good. That's good advice. That is a gold nugget right there. That's what we always like to pass out, these little gold nuggets you can take and say, I'm glad I listened because I learned this today. I'm going to go check that. Yeah. All right. Well, today we're talking about cash is king. So quick question before you jump in, because there's actually a lot here to talk about. Yeah. Do you know where this phrase originated or was kind of popularized?
The phrase cash is king? I have no idea.
Okay. But you've heard it before, right?
I've heard it, yeah. In fact,
I probably say it.
I probably have used it many times. And now that I think about it, I was like, I should probably know where things originate from if I'm going to repeat them. So.
But isn't it funny? Like that phrase can have so many different...
For sure.
Like you could use it in so many different ways. So, all right. So I did do a little bit of research, and the phrase "cash is king" was popularized by Volvo's CEO, which I am not going to pretend to pronounce his name, shortly after the stock market crash of 1987. The expression explains a time when a high percentage of cash can be a buffer against losses and is available for buying assets at a discount during a market decline, which is interesting because in a lot of the blog articles that Rob's been writing about the market, where we're at, what's going on, we kind of look back to, hey, this feels maybe like the 1980s. So it's interesting that phrase was talked about in the 1980s after the market after market declines, similar to 2022, so it's just very interesting. Yeah. So and I think that this is causing a lot of the same things and reactions in people. So they're thinking, well, we've been excited to get higher interest on our cash. We're like, now this cash sitting in emergency funds is earning something. So we're going to first kind of talk about what's the best use of my cash, kind of the math of the interest earned versus the potential interest earned. That's really what you're trying to figure out. Like, where should I put my cash? That's kind of at a base level. Is that kind of how you view where should I put it?
Not so much in terms of where you should put it, but I guess the first filter that I look at it as, what happens if something goes wrong? It's not uncommon that here on the team, I often think of what's the worst case scenario, right? So as we're looking at things, trying to determine if something goes wrong, how are we going to substantiate and live our lifestyle the way that we want to? And, not necessarily focusing 100% on how much you're getting for your cash, but making sure that you have the cash available. And then once you have that cash available, now where's the best spot for that? So in terms of the filters, I actually first look on it. Let's make sure 100% that we have the cash available, that we have that emergency fund first ready to go. And now that we have that ready to go, where's the best spot for that? So
that's great, because a lot of people, I think sometimes they're like, great, I need to have money in an emergency fund. But in the past few years, when it's like, but it's earning nothing. I mean, it's literally just sitting there getting 0.01%. So when we say that, we know that that's not the goal for that bucket, to earn as much as possible. However, when you have options, that is like a secondary goal to make sure that it is earning what it can be.
Absolutely, yeah. So priority is that you have it first and foremost. Secondary is, hey, when you have it, let's make sure it's earning the most it can for you. So.
No, that's great. Okay, so let's talk about a couple reasons right now why this can be, I guess, painful, if you were to say. I could think of a couple. What is something about this? You kind of have pain points around this. What would you say, maybe even when you look at people's checking and savings, when we see statements and we're trying to check this for people, anything that comes to mind?
Yeah, I mean, some of the bigger banks that you might hear of, I won't name any names, but typically what I would call a brick and mortar. So if a bank has an actual store or an actual physical location that you can step into, the thing to remember there is they have to pay for that store. They have to pay for the overhead, the upkeep, the properties, all that fun stuff. Whereas those are funds that potentially could go back in your pocket. So one of the things that you could look for is, a pain point here is when you have a brick and mortar store, sometimes you're not always going to get the highest interest rate. And that's not to say that you can't, but sometimes it's less likely that you're going to.
So what are you seeing on those statements for, let's just say the interest rates? What are you seeing?
Yeah, I mean, 0.1, maybe
Still,
0.2
right?
if we're lucky.
Yeah.
And those actually might even be considered the high yield savings accounts at some of those brick and mortar banks. And
0.01.
And we're looking at it like, it's painful.
So it's funny because we want to help alleviate pain points for clients, but it's actually painful for us when we look at this. We're like, no, you could be doing so much better, and that's really where we're like, okay, it is painful, I think, for them too when you point it out. And sometimes you see such large balances for different reasons in just savings, and so when it's not earning what you can, and then you put that into a dollar value, and you're like, this could have paid for this could have paid for this just for a year of interest or a month, depending on the balance. Then it really starts to show you why it's important.
Yeah, and one of the things that is hard is it's not uncommon for us to come up with a recommendation to say, client, we really recommend that you move your savings account, your emergency fund from this bank to this bank because of X reasons, right? We acknowledge that that's hard because a lot of folks have banking relationships that go back not just to years, but decades. And it's really hard when you set up your entire financial life around this one institution, and now you have other folks coming in here and say, hey, you should be looking at this instead. So we recognize that even not necessarily focused from a financial perspective, but from a physical, from a actual emotional, from a execution perspective, it's hard to actually live out and follow through on that recommendation and to say you need to move. But
because the other thing we try to help people do is simplify and make things less complex. And so sometimes by having your checking and your savings all at one account, it does make it easier to manage your finances. But this is where it's great, is you can just put that one bucket of emergency fund savings that isn't needed to be, like, you don't need it to be there right away. When you need it to be easily accessible. So it does need to be somewhat, easy to access. But it's nice that you can just move this one bucket so it's not too much of a pain. But because that's the other consideration. We want to keep things simple too.
Yeah. And then the natural next question I feel like we get to is, okay, hey, we're going to move this bucket over. Well, how much do we actually have to move over? What do we have to do? Like, is it better over here? Is it better over there? There are a lot of different ways to answer that question. And I feel as though each one is different because, some folks may have, hey, they have a wedding coming up and they want to make sure that they can pay for that wedding or give a gift to a family member that's going to go through a wedding. Maybe there's a baby that's on the way and you want to give a good baby gift. So it's important to make sure that you have really good flexibility. The financial term for that is called liquidity. That if you wanted to turn around and get cash or write a check the very next day, that you could do that. So that's what a high liquidity account really looks like. So there are some vehicles that aren't very liquid. There are some vehicles that are very liquid.
Yeah, well, and that's what I was going to say. Let's give a couple examples. So I know some things people, when the market is down, people kind of flock to things like commodities, a hard commodity. I want to have some gold coins. I want to have silver. Okay, great. So I fully understand that. But where sometimes this liquidity comes in is, okay, but now you need to pay your electricity bill. How can you do that? Your money has to be liquid to be able to function. Yeah,
you don't want to go to the Cash for Gold stores. I think that's a brand name, so not to necessarily throw them under the bus, but pretty much any physical location, there is a cost with converting, whether you're looking at commodities futures or actual hard bullion. There's a cost to transfer that into currency that you actually get to use, because and the reality is we spend in dollars and we save in dollars and we make money in dollars for most of us, and when your lives work around dollars and you try to use a currency alternative from that, it just makes things hard, and there's friction and there's cost.
Yep. Okay, so let's kind of get back to this like general rules of thumb. You kind of talk about how much we need, and it depends. Is there though a general guideline that we kind of give clients?
Yeah, I mean, realistically, again, it's going to be different for every client, depending on circumstances. But a rough gauge is somewhere between 3 to 6 months of your living expenses. And when we look at living expenses, we include housing, we include what you actually spend, so groceries, car bills, all that fun stuff. So you don't have to change your lifestyle one bit for somewhere between 3 to 6 months. Now, if you are in a household where there is, a single earner in the household, generally we might steer that towards the 6-month target. But it might also be influenced to say, hey, let's say you have a lot of liquid assets otherwise. Maybe you have brokerage account, or you have a brokerage account, that you could liquidate and turn around. Hey, maybe you don't need as much the full 6 months there. If you're looking at a situation where you're a dual earning household, maybe you can steer towards the 3-month mark. So each one is different. And even from our recommendations, what we provide clients, people say, hey, I hear what you're saying, but I feel more comfortable having this plus this. And that's okay. As long as we're making an intentional, informed decision, that's always great. We just want to make sure that every client is fully aware, hey, here's the reason that I'm making this. And as long as it's an intentional decision, great, we're okay with that.
So what's cool, what I'm hearing from you is this 3 to 6 months, everyone needs to have an emergency fund.
Yes.
So this is really the basic first thing you do. Before you move on to now, what do I do with money above and beyond this? So what I'm hearing you say is this episode is actually for everyone, because everyone should have an emergency fund. So some people will say, well, what if I don't have extra cash? But nope, this is even just cash that you need to be setting aside. So
exactly, and even if you're starting with zero, right? We would highly recommend that you actually dedicate part of your income coming in on a monthly, on a weekly, or biweekly, whatever paycheck interval you may have. Set aside some of those funds to build up this emergency fund. It is paramount. It is so important. It is the foundation with which your financial life is really built.
Yeah, it gives you confidence really to kind of then start building on top of it. So no, that's great. All right, so let's talk through now. We're going to get to the meat of everything, kind of the current cash options, which is really exciting because I think in 2022, as rates started moving higher, what's funny is this is one of the sections in our financial plan where we always we compare and we say, well, here's your current interest rate, from their statements, like you're saying. And then we say, but here's some, favorite online savings accounts tools that we like, and here's what it's currently earning. So basically, here's what you're getting, here's what you could be getting, and the difference to point it out. So when we talk about that, let's just start talking about, I guess back up, during last year, this changed from I don't know if we started the year, was it 1.5%?
Yeah, probably
something like that. I should have looked. 1.5% to now, just this week, I think we got another email from Ally when they say your rate's going up. I think it was 3.5%. I think we're currently at for a year.
Yeah, so I looked here just before we hopped on. It's currently 3.4%.
Nice. Yep.
In a matter of a year.
Yeah, isn't that crazy? So it moved so fast.
Yeah.
So that's why this matters, because it has changed so much. And we would literally write a plan for a client, and then we'd mail it the next day if it was one we're presenting online, and we'd say, this plan is already outdated because it's already higher. So that is just kind of like a testament to how things change and how quickly. So, and
I'll just say a quick plug is, even when we're doing financial plans, it's just a quick reminder, we constantly review these even after they actually physically get sent out. We're like, hey, we're checking things to make sure they are absolutely right for folks. So.
Exactly. No, that's great. Yeah, that's helpful. You're exactly right. So let's talk through, let's start to talk through some of our favorites. So we've talked about we want it to be liquid. We want it to be make my life simple. This needs to be easy to access. So what are some of your favorites right now that are out there?
Yeah, so I personally bank with Ally. We have no affiliation with them or whatnot. But the reason I have used Ally is just because they made my life simple. So I have a checking account and I have a savings account there, and all of our cash flow hits one of those two accounts, and we really use our accounts in kind of a what I'll call a mothership perspective, that everything flows in and out of those accounts.
The mothership.
The mothership, if you will, right? And everything flows in and out of those accounts, and it makes things simple for us because we only have to manage these two accounts. And as long as there's cash in those accounts and we're not overspending and we have a good handle as to what those balances are, we're in great shape.
Yeah. Ally has a feature that we all love.
Oh, yes, the bucket feature.
Yeah.
Yep.
Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so within Ally, one of the things we see clients do frequently is, hey, they'll set aside an account for this purpose. Maybe it's property taxes, an account for this purpose, and maybe that's income taxes, or an account for savings, or an account for the emergency fund, or the new car. The challenge with that is it gets really hard to manage because you now have, instead of one statement, perhaps 5, 6, 7, depending on how many accounts you have.
And at some banks, they literally set up a new account for each of those buckets.
Yes, whereas with Ally, and I do think there are some other banks that offer this feature as well. With Ally, you have one account, but you get to delineate and bucket out some of these funds. So let's say I've got $20,000 in a savings account. Well, what if I want to earmark $10,000 for the emergency fund? It's really simple in Ally to do that. It's within one account that you're getting the high interest rate on, 3.4%, as of data that's recording. But then let's say, hey, that $10,000 is for the emergency fund, and next $5,000 is for my new car fund, and the other $5,000 is, hey, I've got a big expense coming up, and you've already got that spread out and bucketed and accounted for. But when you're looking at statements and reviewing transactions, it's super simple to look at one statement.
Yeah, and you could even, let's say you buy that car and you're like, okay, this money needs to come out.
Yep.
I mean, it's so easy to move it from one bucket to the next.
Oh, gosh, yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so that's a favorite. And I think the other one that does similar to Ally is Capital One. So those are kind of like two of the favorites when we look out there and we say who's paying the most in interest and has features that are really helpful. Those are two that we've just seen just recently. But like you said, there's no reason or any reason that we're, pushing those over others. So there may be other good options too.
Yeah, the other one that has come up every now and again is Marcus. That's an account from Goldman Sachs. So those between those three, those generally will pay the highest interest rate. Between the high interest rate that you're looking at and the flexibility with the funds, that's why we tend to lean towards the Capital One or the Ally accounts. So
yeah, that's great. All right, so what else? So what other, besides an online savings account, what other types of options could people have?
Yeah, so kind of the thing that was the origination or the inspiration for even this episode here today was we had a client asking us about CDs. And as we evaluated the CDs, it's really nice to see that, hey, as interest rates on savings accounts have jumped so significantly, it's great to see that CDs have also jumped significantly. However, the concern that we had with looking at a CD or even a CD ladder perhaps, which I can get into in just a minute, but even an individual CD is when you purchase that CD, most of the time, there are ones that changes, but most of the time you are locking in that interest rate. As we just kind of went through just this past year, we had an interest rate go from 1.5% to now 3.4%. And when you're in that CD, you're locking in when you purchase that CD what your interest rate's going to be. Some of them can be pretty restrictive to say, hey, you're only going to get the interest if you keep it for the full term.
Right.
I think even Ally has an offer right now that if you hold a CD for 2 years, you can get over 4%.
Yep.
But the cause that, or concern that we have here is, well, what if interest rates continue to rise and creep up? You've got your money locked up, so you're not as flexible. If interest rates continue to rise, well, your savings account's going to keep up because your savings account's going to continue changing, but that CD is not going to. So that's one of the hesitations we have with those.
Yeah, which was so interesting when we were talking about this, that it was like, okay, so in the online savings account, I can get, let's say 3.5. If I did a 1 year or a 2 year CD, it was a little bit different. Let's say it's 4.5. But this is where, okay, do I take some of that money and put it there? This is where I think kind of like what people question and what they start to kind of, if we want to call it a pain point, they're like, wait, do I just stay here or could I be getting more? Should I be doing more? And so this is where, we were really talking through, and you made the great point of, well, if we if we lock it into a CD and rates keep going up, then what if rates are above this and they could have been earning more? So it's just so interesting how something so great But something even better, it's like, here's A, and then there's B, but wait, it's better. It's kind of like that.
But wait,
there's
more.
always, it's like, what do I have to give up to get these rates?
Yeah, opportunity cost is a huge, huge aspect, especially when we're dealing with things that are changing very quickly and very rapidly. So understanding that interest rates may continue to change.
Yep.
We don't know what the future holds specifically, but we think it's very important to make sure that we can be flexible, we can be fluid when we need to be, and optimize things where we can.
Exactly. Yep. Okay, so we've talked about money markets or online savings accounts. Those can be used sometimes interchangeably.
Yeah.
And then CDs. I think there's like another good option out there.
Yeah, the other one that got a lot of media attention. It's interesting that it's kind of died down here in the last, I'll say, 4 to 6 months.
Yeah.
But it's I-bonds. So I-bonds are something you would purchase directly from the U.S. Treasury. So the website you'd go to is treasurydirect.gov. And the nice thing from I-bonds is the fact that those are paying 6.89% right now.
For a year.
For a year.
Like you lock that in for a year.
So all these rates are considered APR, or basically the annual percentage rate. So there's some math that gets accounted for in terms of when they credit this and that. But if you're trying to evaluate and look at things, you want to look at things from a comparable basis. That's where you're looking at the APR. Or excuse me, APY, annual percentage yield. But the challenges that you might have with I-bonds are once you put money in there, you're locked up for a year.
Yep.
So think of it as a CD. Now, there are CDs that aren't locked up for a year, but most are. Most of the CDs you're going to see are. So you've got that money locked up. You can't touch it for a year. Additionally, you've got a $10,000 contribution limit each calendar year. So if you have a husband and wife client, you can put $20,000 into I-bonds in any given year. However, let's say you have trust documents. Well, there's another $20,000 because your trust can be set up as a separate entity as well. If you've got kids, there's potentially more, right? So you can scale that number pretty quickly and easily as you need to meet your emergency fund goals.
Yeah.
But it's important to realize that, again, that money's locked up for a year. Now, once you pass that first year, the money's much more liquid. In fact, just to test things out on my end. So full disclosure, I have a Treasury Direct account. And for this past year, I had been purchasing I-bonds just to test things out because I don't like telling clients to say, hey, do this or that if I've not done it myself.
Yeah.
I tested the process out. Redeemed one of the bonds, actually redeemed a couple of them, and everything was really simple. I was quite surprised.
That's great.
The account's really annoying to get into in terms of the logistics or whatnot, with the passwords and whatnot. But once you get comfortable with it, they make it relatively easy now.
Yeah,
so.
That's great though. So we kind of talked through. I think this is really helpful because it is kind of like you have 3 doors. Okay, there's this, or this, or it's like this. Online commercial sales, like the salesmen who are like, but wait, there's a better offer. Like, but we're throwing in the chamois with the car wax or whatever. So it's just kind of funny. There's all these choices. So I think it really leaves people questioning and wondering, well, wait, which one is right for me? And so let's kind of talk through how we evaluate this. We've already kind of talked through we need to have the money we need. We need to know what that money's for. We need to know each of these different options. What are they paying? What are the current rates? But then it's kind of talking through, okay, so which one is right for me? So at the very base, we've said you need to be sure and have this emergency fund. This is this 3 to 6 months of money that we want set aside outside of investment accounts. So it's there, it's easily accessible if something comes up and you need it, which that's just your first step. And this gives me confidence that this is there. So now as I start building and as I start putting money into, investment accounts, this might be a brokerage account as I continue to do retirement accounts. So now you're building on top of this. One of the other interesting things that people will typically jump to even before the emergency fund is just investing in the market.
Yes.
And so it's always, this is where sometimes, especially for, younger clients, we say this is the first step. And again, it has been hard because that money doesn't grow. I think now, today it's a little different because it is earning something. So now it feels like, okay, I have a reason to just leave this sit here. But let's just talk about, so we're 2023, we are just over a month in and the S&P 500 is up.
Yeah, I think it's 8.25% thus far.
8.25%.
Yeah, 8.25%, and Yeah, that's really appealing.
Yeah, and it's not to say that like the rest of the year that's what's going to continue. But this is where you have to realize what you need, where your money needs to be, and what's next for you. What are the goals you're working on right now in your plan? And because you even mentioned, if I lock this up in a CD, okay, this is what I'm going to get. But what happens, and I think what we've seen over the past few years, is that we'll see a lot of money sitting in savings accounts or just even in checking accounts. And I don't want people to think that we only, work with like super wealthy people and that they have all this cash. This is just someone who like maybe sold a home, didn't know where to put the money or just hadn't moved it yet. Or, they just have cash there for some reason. Maybe you inherited funds and you just never moved it somewhere. So it's even just people that have money sitting there and it needs to be given a place to go. So let's talk through now that this is why like the biggest piece of this is like being diversified. So it's a great reminder of don't put all of your eggs in one basket. So kind of back to like cash is king, but is it, where we tell clients all the time to be diversified.
Well, yeah. And to me, it kind of comes back to, hey, your cash is your foundation, right? So in my case, as I mentioned, the mothership, right? I know that the mothership of my couple of Ally accounts, everything flows in through there. However, if I need to save for my retirement accounts, if my wife needs to save for her retirement accounts, hey, we know that from a cash flow perspective, what's this going to affect? To me, it's really important to be just incredibly intentional, right? As you're saying and talking about, whether folks receive inheritances or maybe they sold a home or whatnot, sometimes it's like, hey, I've got this big pot of money. Well, what do I do with it? I don't know what to do. I'll take care of it next week. Next week turns into next month. Next month turns into next quarter, perhaps next year. And, there is costs, there's opportunity costs where, hey, if you're saving beyond your emergency fund and it's still in cash and, hey, it's not even in one of the high yield savings accounts, there's opportunity where you could be missing out on, like I said, the market's up 8.25% thus far. Now, it's important that you're not chasing returns.
Exactly.
So you have to work from your financial foundation to make sure that's solid so that if something bad happens, the worst case scenario happens, you're still okay. We want to make sure that's okay. But it is also important too to, once we have that financial foundation, how are you optimizing thereafter?
Yeah. And I think that's the biggest thing. It's being diversified, but also staying diversified. So, what happens as we see one thing you mentioned, kind of back in 2022, I-bonds were really popular. Probably because the market was going down and they were going up. And, we all kind of chase the thing that is going up. That's what we want our money to do, right? Is to grow. And so it's just natural. It's our natural tendency. So now with the market going up, all these people locked in these great rates for a year. And that might have been the right place for them. But it's making sure, because now if the market's going up higher than those I-bonds, well, now you might want to be getting out and you can't be doing that. So you've got to understand the pros and the cons of each and what you need for your situation.
Yeah, flexibility and liquidity are important. And I think they're often overlooked in terms of the value they provide, because it's not, you can't look at it on a piece of paper and say, hey, this is immediately liquid right away or very fluid to be able to move it around. But if you're locked in for that year, like you're saying, and, oh gosh, I really wish I would have been able to do this or that with the funds. Maybe you can't.
Exactly, yeah.
So yeah, there are lots of ways to slice it. I know one thing that is likely to see an uptick here are permanent life insurance policies being sold.
Yes.
This could probably be a whole other episode in and of itself, with interest rates changing the way they are. I spend a lot of time looking at our clients' insurance policies, and that's not to say insurance is bad. I absolutely love insurance because it's offloading risk, and I think there's a right way to handle it. There's a not right way to handle it as well. But it's really important to, again, be incredibly intentional with what you're doing with your funds, and being diversified with how you can access those flexibility and whatnot included.
No, that's great. I think it's just helpful. I think, when we got this question, because we've been evaluated, we've been watching all of the different interest rates as they've been changing and trying to keep up with kind of recommending here, what's the best place to put cash. And then now we have even more options. It can become overwhelming. So it can be, again, that kind of overwhelm can just lead us to just kind of sit and not do anything. Or we're just not clear because, well, this one's earning more, but I have to put it in there for longer. Or it just does not lead to clarity. clarity, and that's exactly what we try to bring to clients, to explain these things, to help them understand. And then we say, okay, so for your plan, this is what we should be doing, which then gives you the confidence to actually go and do that. And now to look back and say, great, I'm glad I did that. I earned this. And then going forward, we just continue to evaluate those options. So this has been really helpful because I think we looked back and we're like, wait, the market's up this, all of these interest rates are doing this. There's CDs, there's so many great options, but you don't want to get caught up in that. We want to stay diversified.
Yeah, and you just said something too that I think is really, really important is you've got to continually look at this, right? It's not as if, hey, I made a decision 3 years ago that, my emergency fund is going to be X and here's where it's going to be, and I never have to look at it again. As interest rates have changed so significantly, that's going to influence what decisions you make with your money. Again, it comes back to being incredibly intentional, but reviewing it on a regular basis helps you be intentional in that regard. So, we look at this on a constant day-to-day basis for clients. And, even if, hey, you're not sure that you want to, hire a financial advisor, that's okay. We would just highly encourage you to be actively looking at this to see what's going to make the most sense for you and your finances.
Exactly. Yeah. So whether you're a person where you haven't looked at this and you're saying, where should I be putting it? I haven't even been aware. Or whether you're someone who actually has an emergency fund and has been saving in these places, I consider, this one of the benefits and one of the opportunities that you have if you've been saving cash. You now have the opportunity to earn as much interest as possible on that. So you should feel really good about what you have done. And people who aren't quite sure, you can say, okay, now I'm going to get it where it should go because now I'm aware. So, I think we should just say, go therefore and earn interest. You choose where.
Go and earn.
Exactly.
Go and earn.
All right. Well, thank you so much. This has been really helpful, Trevor.
Yeah, it's been fun.
Yeah, helping us put these things in perspective, or answer a lot of questions and how to think about this. So, all right. Well, thanks for listening today. You can check out our show notes on our website for additional resources and any links that we mention. You don't want to miss out on little gold nuggets that we kind of give throughout these episodes. So you can sign up for our bi-weekly email too. There's a form on our blog page, and we're always talking about the latest content, what's new in the industry, or laws that have just been passed, and just ultimately bringing clarity to your questions. All right, until next time, we'll see you later.
Thanks for listening. Your host was Michelle Smollenberger, a certified financial planner and the CEO at FDS. Guests featured are from Financial Design Studio, a team of experienced fiduciary, fee-only advisors based here in Chicago. Anna Lewis is the executive producer of the Behind the Designs podcast. And as always, for more information about Financial Design Studio and who we are, check out our website, financialdesignstudio.com. Final note, all content discussed on this podcast should not be taken as financial advice. Financial Design Studio accepts no responsibility for your individual choices. We'll see you in the next episode.